Welcome, everybody. We are back with the Leo Zagami show in the new format with an Illuminati confession, celebrating those confessions. For 20 years, Leo Zagami has been basically describing the New World Order with its very modest approach that was, however, detected by none other than Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, Leo Zagami is in the Epstein files. Already back in 2008, 2 years after I started my confessions, there was a guy who signed himself as Matt CC, probably the creator of The Simpsons, who wrote to Jeffrey Epstein advising him to check out my work. Amongst those helpful websites for learning the nature of the New World Order. You don't believe me? This is it. Okay, directly from the website of justice.gov. As you can see, Leo Lion Zagami at WordPress back in 2008. There is a link which I'm going to add here in the chat, where you can check out also for yourself this document that talks about the Illuminati families and whatnot. I'm going to, of course, share this link also on the screen so you can have a good look at it. And then this is the actual file. You can scroll. Talks about the Rockefeller family, the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, and as you can see here, you have the Illuminati, the CIA, Scientology, chemtrails, all kinds of things, including Leo Zagami. And the link, here is the link. So let me show you actually the article which I published a few days ago, which explains you how I got into the Epstein files. I briefly told you already. It was because, of course, I started 20 years ago, and 20 years ago, only few people were talking about these subjects, and even fewer people were actually exposing them directly from within the New World Order and their secret societies. And that, of course, got the attention of Jeffrey Epstein, who, by the way, went with an interview with Bannon confirming, see here you have the website, which I'm going to share also so you have. Here we go. This is the website, the EFTA 01082667 is the code and the number which defines the file of because it's Jeff Epstein's library is so vast with millions of files. Of course, my name was not involved in any nefarious activity, but it was instead mentioned as an expert on the New World Order, because they knew that I was exposing them back then, and they were trying to monitor what was being said. Now, let's explain, though. I've published 2 articles of great importance on my website this week, and we're going to be analyzing even further what I've been saying. One is Leo Zagami, the Illuminati families and their associates are inside the last batch of the Epstein files. The other one is instead regarding the Epstein files confirm the key role of Jeffrey Frankist Viennese banking family and the Rothschild in the life of young Adolf Hitler. The information that I'm going to reveal today, I'm going to connect a lot of dots for those people who are really interested in knowing the truth. Like this mail that confirms what I've been stating in my book on Jeffrey Epstein. The Epsteins were the Vienna bankers brought their bank on the ring, hence still Palais Epstein. In fact, in the center of Vienna, you have actually a place, a palace, a neo-Renaissantal palace in the center of Vienna that was constructed by an ancestor of Jeffrey Epstein. When Steve Bannon interviews him, that doesn't come to light. I've been contacted a week ago when my name surfaced on the files by Christian Harris. Christian Harris told me, Leo, your name is in the Epstein files. I said,
what do I mean? He formed something called the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is some spooky stuff. People said it was some of the people that the Illuminati.
Illuminati. Yes, he talks about the Trilateral Commission. He talks about the Illuminati. But Steve Bannon, in his interview, never talks about the real origins of Jeffrey Epstein, describing him as a guy, you know, the son of a modest figure living in Brooklyn, somebody who, a schmuck, he described him, how a guy like you has managed to get into these kind of circles, and also the mentorship of David Rockefeller. Now, to understand the mentorship of David Rockefeller, you should go back to the episode I dedicated to the Federal Reserve, because it explains how the Rockefeller family, which was of course involved with the Schiff, the Warburgs, and JP Morgan in creating that Federal Reserve that changed forever the history of the United States of America. So Rockefeller has a direct link, but today I'm going to show you even more. Yes, guys, today I'm going to show you even more. So thanks to our sponsors, we can do this, because thanks to the sponsors and thanks to the people who donate. Let me share here on the screen the GoFundMe, which is one of the ways you can donate. There is also a Cash App handle you can find at leozagami.com. And thanks to our sponsors today, our sponsors are, let me thank our sponsors in the meantime. Okay, our sponsors are for today, Margot Zadaminta, Daniel Estes. Only 2 sponsors today, but we have, fortunately, had people purchasing this book. Finally, people start to realize that The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster is an essential reading, because it's the only book that talks about Jeffrey Epstein links with the Sabbatean Frankists, which today you will discover are absolutely essential. So let me put the GoFundMe here, and let's start with the first few minutes of the interview that Jeffrey Epstein gave to Bannon, which is also part of the last batch of the Epstein files.
Before we get into the deep stuff, let's give some basics, or some things I want to inquire from the others. Walk me through the Santa Fe Institute. What was it about the time of the math? And this was in the late 90s. So they're not going to hear me on this part, right? We're going to do it both ways?
It will not be on the video, but we do have you recorded.
Fine. Remember, when you're answering on these questions, I'm not in the shot, and they're never going to hear my voice. So a little bit you got to repeat in your answer, you got to repeat what my question was.
Oh,
a little bit.
Okay.
Santa Fe Institute. Why, when you're at the top of your game on Wall Street, do you decide to finance, which was at the time, or endow, or become the donor or sponsor, however you want to say it, for what was considered the most cutting edge group of mathematicians in the world? Action.
So Santa Fe Institute in the late 80s, early 90s, I was interested, I was on the board of Rockefeller. So that starts Rockefeller.
I'm the board Rockefeller. Santa Fe Institute, I talked about it also in my book, the connection of Jeffrey Epstein with the Santa Fe Institute. If you want to know more about it, there is some great insights in my book. But here, there is also Jeffrey Epstein confirming his connection with David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller is very important in this story because David Rockefeller, of course, represents a very important family here in the United States of America. I've talked about the influence that the Rockefeller Foundation and the Rockefeller family had in the molding of the American dream, in crafting it and conducting after the Second World War in volume 8 of my Confessions. But let's move further with more of Epstein's revelations and also his non-revelations, because in that email to Ariane de Rothschild, and there is more than one email, he confirms the history of his family. He was fixated with the people's family background, their pedigree, if they were a member of the elite or not. And today I'm going to show you that this last batch of Epstein files actually confirm a lot. Guys, 100% of what I wrote here, and they give us even a further insight in what is happening now and why they are covering up this whole story. If you think about it, at the moment we have Mandelson also investigated in Great Britain. Do people really know who Mandelson is? Do you know that this guy is actually a key from a very important Jewish family? Well, wait, because we're going to be talking about that in a second.
It's a university formed by John D. Rockefeller to sort of give back to the community. It's east side of Manhattan, except it was old. It was sort of old-fashioned. They were talking about medicine, and medicine by itself was, again, subject to the ideas of science. They were trying to use science to find cures for disease. And I said, no, we need to do something different. We need to start interdisciplinary work. In most...
How did a schmuck like you get on the board of Rockefeller? What year was that?
See, how does a schmuck like you get on the board of Rockefeller? And you will not hear the real answer from Jeffrey Epstein. The real answers on who is really Jeffrey Epstein are inside his emails instead to Ariane de Rothschild, to other members of the elite. He doesn't give, of course, this answer in front of the cameras for the whole world to know that he is the descendant of one of the most influential banking families, Jewish banking families in Europe.
I don't remember, I think 89 and 91.
So that's one of the most prestigious research places in the world, correct?
Yes.
Okay, how did a guy like you get on the board of a blue blood, internationally known, hard research, Nobel Prize winners all over the place? How do they pick a guy like you, a trader from, or basically some guy from Bear Stearns?
Good question. So I was asked to be on the board of Rockefeller, and I think it was...
A good question, but he doesn't give the answer. That's the problem here. He doesn't give the answer. Guys, let me show you a second, once again, this important email from Ariane de Rothschild that clears the matter once and for all on who is Jeffrey Epstein. And now we're going to go into the inside of his family, because here you see the Epsteins were, by the way, financed by three wealthy families, the Gutmans, the Epstein, and the Rothschilds. They actually helped a young Adolf Hitler who was selling his clothes and artwork and living in a shelter. The Epsteins were the big Vienna bankers, bought the bank on the ring hand steel Palais Epstein, who is the ancestor of Jeffrey Epstein, Gustav von Epstein. Let me show you the history of one of the most influential families, because this email confirms it once and for all, and now there can be no more doubt about the Sabbatean Frankist legacy at work here. Prague, Bohemia, Austrian Empire. I also explain why the name of the Bohemian Club is actually based on Bohemia, not on the Bohemian, as is often erroneously thought. And Gustav von Epstein, he was the fourth child of Leopold Epstein, who was the director of the National Bank of the time. The National Bank. Let me show you here. And the problem was, he also, in 1866, the Emperor Franz Joseph bestowed Epstein with the Iron Crown Third Class. The problem was that most of Gustav's fortune was destroyed in the panic of 1873, partially due to Adolf Tossig, who had speculated with Epstein money before committing suicide that year. And so that was the moment in which then the Epstein family started to have financial problems and eventually moved to the United States. But this gentleman here was the illustrious ancestor, aside from also Leopold Epstein, who actually original name was Lazar Epstein. Let me show you a second here, because this is the real story, not the fake interviews made by that scammer of Steve Bannon. Fabric, wholesale, bank business, Leopold Epstein. Let me show you here. This is a document, actually. As you can see, L. Epstein, Vienna. It's an original document from 1858. Okay, so this is another ancestor of Jeffrey Epstein. It says, in the address book of the trading bodies and factories of the imperial and royal capital and residency of Vienna, then of several provincial cities for the year 1845, the following entry can be found. Mr. Epstein Lazar from Prague, under the company name recorded here and in Prague, L. Epstein. So this L, so here, thanks to their, because they were specialized in the printing of cotton fabrics known as calico printing. This is part of, it's very important, because calico printing refers to a process of printing colored patterns onto plain woven cotton fabric. And they were actually very much involved with this kind of business. The textile industry was very close to the Epstein families, and also the other branch of the Epstein family, the branch in Poland, which was also a very successful branch. Let me show you here the branch in Poland. This is the Evo, basically is the Encyclopedia of Jews in Eastern Europe. And here it says, you remember that in my book I explained that the Sabbatean Frankist epicenter was not only Vienna, but also Poland. I have a whole chapter dedicated to Poland in my book on Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, the banker industry in Warsaw, Jakub Epstein, was a merchant Polish army officer and Freemason. Then this guy, of course, Epstein, they worked in banking. They were connected to the merchants, and they were also connected to textiles. But they were also connected to the Rothschilds, brokering loans from the Rothschilds in Frankfurt. So the connection with the Rothschild is a very old connection. Mieczysław Epstein, trained as a banker in Berlin, Brussels, and Paris, married Leonid Lambert, daughter of a Brussels private banker and Rothschild representative, in 1855. You see, the Epsteins, also Mieczysław, was involved in a number of manufacturing enterprises in both textiles and heavy industry. But the involvement with the banking is impressive. From 1841, he advised the Ministry of Finance on general economic and trade matters. So also, you see, Jan Epstein traded at various European banking houses and served from 1848 as trade advisor to the State Bank of the Kingdom of Poland. This is the Polish branch, without counting the other branch, the branch in Prague, and they're all connected to the Asiatic Brethren, which I explained was that Masonic order that was created to embrace Sabbatean Frankism, which saw the involvement of a direct relative of Jacob Frank, Moses Dobruska, Thomas Schoenfield, who was nobilitated after, of course, also connected to Vienna and connected to the Illuminati, and then went and lost his life in the French Revolution with another name, Junius Frey. But let's go back to Jeffrey Epstein. He never, ever admits who he is, his family connections. That is really, I mean, if Steve Bannon was a real journalist, he would have known that Jeffrey Epstein became associated with David Rockefeller because of his own family connections. I laugh because the other day I saw some Italian experts talking on Italian TV, and one of them was saying, "Oh, Jeffrey Epstein, well, he was the son of a modest guy who was working at the parking lot in Brooklyn, a guy in charge of a car park." I mean, come on, guys, a car park? Let me show you who was Leopold Epstein, the ancestor of Jeffrey Epstein. He was definitely not a modest guy. I mean, here we're talking about people who had, Leopold Epstein was appointed director of the National Bank, among other things. So there is a lot of disinformation, but I repeat, there is also some great information in those files that have been released that confirm the validity of my thesis in this book and the relevance of it. Because here we are talking about the Epstein family being one of the most influential family, together with the Rothschilds, directly connected with the Rothschilds. So it's not a surprise when at one point now, today, a few hours before I go on the air, Financial Times publishes an article, how the House of Rothschild became entangled with Epstein, and how basically Jeffrey Epstein intervened directly in the disputes that were tearing apart the family. There was actually an intervention of Jeffrey Epstein that was rewarded with $25 million by Ariane de Rothschild and the Edmond de Rothschild private banking institution. You don't believe me? Well, this is an article that was published 2 days ago by the Telegraph. Here we go. Epstein helped. So people would say, but how can Epstein help the Rothschilds? I mean, who the hell would believe something like that? But that's the truth. That's the truth. You see, Ariane de Rothschild was married with Benjamin de Rothschild, who became, with Ariane de Rothschild, the guy who inherited one of the main two branches of the Rothschild today. There is the French and English branch that merged in 2003, that are the ones that, of course, are connected with the British royal family, that invest the money of the British nobility. But then we have also Edmond the Rothschild, the established company that came out of the French branch and established the Swiss branch. Now, at the moment, just to let you know the differences, these two branches are finally not disputing, they're not fighting against each other because of Jeffrey Epstein. But there was a war that in 2015, right when Ariane de Rothschild became the CEO, became a big problem. And only Jeffrey Epstein was able to sort out this problem. Okay, this guy you see here is David Rothschild. It's actually the guy in charge of the British-French branch. And at one point, he wanted to use the name Rothschild as an exclusivity. This became a big problem for Ariane de Rothschild and for the Edmond de Rothschild group, especially because Baron de Rothschild is married with Princess Olympia from the black nobility, Analdo Brandini. Yes, Analdo Brandini. And if you want to, the Aldo Brandini, you just put here Aldo Brandini. And this family, the Aldo Brandini, put it in English, so now the Aldo Brandini are resident in Rome with close ties to the Vatican. The house of Aldo Brandini is part of the black aristocracy. They also had a pope. Aldo Brandini family reached the height of its powers when Ippolito Aldo Brandini became Pope Clement VII. And they are, I repeat, the black nobility is not a conspiracy theory. It says here, the family name lives on, however, be a branch of the Borghese family, also connected to the Borghese family of the Brandini, Prince Paolo Borghese in the 17th century. This line is descendant from Don Camillo Borghese, Prince Aldo Brandini, a leading member of the black nobility. So this family was having a dispute on the use of the Rothschild name. At the same time that this whole thing was going on, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, was going after the Swiss firm Edmond de Rothschild because, as you know, 10, 11 years ago, there was a lot of talk about Americans and their Swiss bank accounts, so that they are forbidden from having bank accounts in Switzerland. There was the DOJ that wanted to fine the Edmond de Rothschild institution. And who intervened to actually get the fine to the minimum levels, paying a sum that sincerely seems ridiculous for people who owe billions? It was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein intervened on behalf of the Edmond de Rothschild financial institution with the DOJ. Today we talk about the DOJ releasing files on Epstein. And we see, we going after what? Jeffrey Epstein was actually working on behalf of the Rothschild family to try to get this whole thing in some way. The two rival families were having also a big problem because it wasn't only the name. There was at the time also a big financial problem that was going on. So let me explain you a little bit more. The Edmond de Rothschild group today represents a force in the economy of the world, managing approximately $204 billion US. The Rothschild and Co. company, the other company, the English-French Rothschild branch, manages over 100 billion. But of course, they have also a much older legacy. So the Edmond de Rothschild group manages more money than the Rothschild and Co., the Paris-based firm, the Edmond de Rothschild group, which is based in Switzerland. As of late 2024, Edmond de Rothschild reported 200 billion plus, approximately, in assets under management, whereas Rothschild & Co. is noting of having over 100 billion. Now, the Edmond de Rothschild group specializes almost exclusively in private banking and asset management. When instead you have, the Rothschild & Co. that is primarily known for financial advisory and investment banking, with a growing yet smaller private banking and asset management arm compared to its Swiss rival. However, we are talking here about the giants of the finance, and I wanted to explain a little bit more about this situation, because how did this schmuck from nowhere get 25 million from the Edmond de Rothschild company for his, because he fixed one of the biggest problems that this company was facing, the loss of the use of the name Rothschild. See, then in this document, dear Jeffrey, on behalf of the Southern Trading Company, Inc., Virgin Company Corporation, you, and on behalf of the Southern Trust Company, by the way, was used for all its pedophile activities, collaborating with Under Rothschild and blah, blah, blah. And here it says $25 million payment. It's black and white. I mean, there is no conspiracy theory. This is actually a payment that was made by the Rothschild group to Jeffrey Epstein. And the reason was that he intervened in this very big dispute. And on top of that, of course, he then helped Ariane de Rothschild, as well as the other branch of the Rothschild, multiplying by many, many billions their capital, thanks to their investment in Bitcoin. Jeffrey Epstein invested $3 million in Coinbase in 2014. Jeffrey Epstein invested $3 million in Coinbase. With the cost of the Bitcoin back then, he has probably by now will have made 1,000%. I mean, he will have made the amount of money that these people made, also thanks to Jeffrey Epstein, who was behind the growth of the Bitcoin phenomenon, by the way. So let me explain a little bit the situation. Here you have this war between the two Epstein factions, Rothschild factions, and we see very clearly that Jeffrey Epstein is siding with Ariane de Rothschild. Ariane de Rothschild, though, at the time, the guy who was also in charge of the company was the husband. The husband, Benjamin Rothschild, mysteriously dies in 2021. He dies at only 57 years, so he's very young. He dies apparently of a heart attack. This is very strange, guys, because then she will become again the CEO of the company. Soon after, she will own, of course, the entirety of the company after the death of the husband, but then she will become again the CEO, because she had become CEO in 2015, but then left to the husband this work, and then she went back into it. They were married for 27 years, and apparently they had a lot of problems in their marriage, problems that she used to talk about with Jeffrey Epstein. This guy dies at 57. The interesting thing is that here is a family dispute which is still ongoing on the castle of the family, which contains the biggest art museum, private art museum in Europe, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Benjamin de Rothschild, the mother of Benjamin de Rothschild, was actually against Ariane de Rothschild and against Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, the mother of Benjamin de Rothschild was, from what is being said here in this article on this, both the mother and Benjamin were siding with the other faction of the Rothschild family. The Rothschild family dispute saw David de Rothschild against Ariane de Rothschild. That is, see, during a legal dispute with Baron David René James de Rothschild, her cousin, over the use of the dynastic name in the business. Let me show you here. Rival Rothschilds at war over family name. That dispute, like we stated earlier, was eventually sorted out by Jeffrey Epstein, who was paid also a lot of money for having done that. Epstein, though, said a couple of interesting things here. He said, Baron de Rothschild married aristocratic Italian Olimpa Anna Dobradini, Roman Catholic, in 1974. They actually have 4 children who are also involved very much in the Rothschild family business. But the interesting thing here is Jeffrey says to Ariane de Rothschild, he is also finding out, and that is, of course, in this dispute, you have, Ariane de Rothschild talking with Epstein. So in one exchange dated April 9, 2015, she wrote to Epstein, "Did you see David's announcement? He was renaming his group Rothschild & Co." That is the problem here. A follow-up note less than 30 minutes later added, "He's getting whipped in the open by a woman, non-Jewish, non-family born, non-banker born." Now, that is not really a nice thing to say about the Aldobrandini princess. Now, if he's referring to her, because he's getting whipped in the open by a woman non-Jewish, it could only be the wife. I mean, maybe somebody else, I don't know. In any case, he's also finding out that he's not all-powerful in Paris. It makes it worse for him to refer to Nadine and Benjamin as they're both totally disrespected. This also is very interesting here, because we find that David Baron de Rothschild is actually somehow in course with Nadine and Benjamin. Nadine is the mother of Benjamin, and Benjamin is the husband of Ariane de Rothschild. So here is Jeffrey Epstein talking about the fact that the husband and the mother are on the side of the other faction of the Rothschild family. But the interesting thing about Nadine is still alive. And actually, at the moment, there is still a dispute between Nadine, even if the family name thing was sorted out. The dispute with Nadine is still ongoing. But the interesting thing also about Nadine de Rothschild is that Nadine de Rothschild was proposed after the husband died, Edmond de Rothschild, the founder of that branch. Nadine de Rothschild was proposed by none other than David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller wanted to marry Nadine de Rothschild. See, Nadine de Rothschild, this is Nadine de Rothschild, still alive. She was born in 1932. She was a former actress, and then she was the widow of banker Edmond de Rothschild. Now, when she became a widow, and you can see it here, following her husband's death, David Rockefeller proposed to her, but she refused. So imagine that. So David Rockefeller had hoped for the ultimate alliance with the Rothschild by marrying Nadine de Rothschild, who was becoming also a very important heiress in the meantime. So here you have it's an incredible story if you think about it. We have Jeffrey Epstein getting involved in all these family matters between the Rothschild, and Epstein here says to Baroness de Rothschild about her complaints, Ariane de Rothschild. Yes, predictable. He described your lawsuit, so he's talking about Baron de Rothschild, of course, because he's in contact with Baron de Rothschild. He said, describe your lawsuit as toothless and much more, not very nice. He's told others that Nadine and Benjamin are leaning towards him rather than you. Nadine removing money, etc. In fact, Nadine in 2014 removes the money from the family. So there is this whole thing, which here you can also see. Nadine de Rothschild, you go down, she was the owner, the principal owner of the Edmund, the husband was the principal owner, so she inherited, in 2014, though, she held 17% of the holdings capital and 7% of the voting rights of Edmond de Rothschild Group. In disagreement with her daughter-in-law, Ariane de Rothschild, she transferred her share in the family fortune to the Swiss private bank, Pictet, in 2014-2019. In that period, it was really Jeffrey Epstein who was advising Ariane de Rothschild, who I don't know if she really knew how to do her job, because it seems in all these emails that she's extremely worried and that she really needs the expertise of Jeffrey Epstein. Apparently, Jeffrey Epstein contacts the Union de Banque Suisse to make a deal, and then later on also the private bank firm, which is a very influential one, Julius Baer, and that didn't work out, but they were trying various solutions here. Ariane de Rothschild was very worried because she had, against her, she had arrived to almost take over the company from her husband. The husband probably wasn't very well. In any case, they were not really getting along that much, but the husband and the mother were on the side of the other Rothschilds who wanted to use the name Rothschild & Co. as an exclusivity. So it's a big mess, but Jeffrey Epstein is involved in this whole mess. And in this war that eventually, this dispute, Baron de Rothschild was at war with Baroness Rothschild after he renamed his French investment banking firm, previously Paris Orléans, to Rothschild & Co. and began presenting the company as the Rothschild Group in 2015. Baroness de Rothschild, who married the late Benjamin de Rothschild in 1999, expressed her frustration to the financier over the legal battle, writing to him in June 2017, "The vitriol is only additional fuel to my determination. I absolutely hate unfairness." Now, in this Sabbatean Frankish soap opera of sorts between all these members of various important families, at one point, Epstein responds, "My new mantra, I will not transmit any of cousin's vitriol as it seems to upset you. No guilt." Now, once they sorted out the whole thing, where do you think these people will go and have a big party? You will expect, I don't know, some fancy place. No, the proposal of Jeffrey Epstein is to go all to Cuba in a visit hosted by the Castro family. Guys, there is still people who believe that communism is a real thing. Communism is a fraud. Here you have Jeffrey Epstein inviting Ariane de Rothschild to Cuba, saying there is an unreal beauty, bring your daughters along, and the Edmond de Rothschild Group, because of all this, had to admit the existence of a professional relationship, but also a more personal relationship amongst the two. Of course, Ariane de Rothschild, the official statement that was published by the French newspaper Le Monde says, Ariane de Rothschild had no knowledge of Mr. Epstein's personal behavior. Of course, just like that other pervert of Princess Mette-Marit, who I know there in Norway. These people are all corrupt, all a bunch of depraved individuals, which I have exposed for 20 years. And in fact, guys, for that reason, even Jeffrey Epstein was advised to follow my website back in 2008. That's why I'm on the Epstein files. And I've been exposing this New World Order. I've been exposing this whole reality in 12 books. The last one was published last year, volume 12. From volume 1 to volume 12, an encyclopedia of all that is the New World Order and all the secret societies we commonly refer to as the Illuminati. These are very important books that you should all read. Remember, like I stated, they were actually writing to Jeffrey Epstein, telling him to go and check my website. I think that you should do the same. And you should maybe also purchase my book on Jeffrey Epstein to realize that what I wrote is unique. See, this is from the Jeffrey Epstein files, EFTA 0182673. And you have all the various bloodlines, including the Rothschild, the Rockefeller, and so on, the Illuminati families and their associates. The mail was written in September 2008. Today, there is a bunch of people that talk about these subjects. But back in those days, almost 20 years ago, there was only me and maybe another 3 or 4 people. It's important, guys, that you get your information from a reliable source. Remember that. And now let's go back into explaining what is happening here with the background that, of course, shows us that Jeffrey Epstein was heavily involved with the Rothschilds, because, as he said himself, his family, together with the Rothschild and the Gutmanns, were actually involved in helping a young Adolf Hitler. You can go and check this out in an article I published on leozagami.com. These are all Sabbatean Frankists. They're all Sabbatean Frankists. Think the only news outlet that mentioned the fact that Epstein said to Ariane de Rothschild that their families, Rothschild, Epstein, and the Gutmanns helped Hitler was RT. And then Ariane de Rothschild said, generosity goes unrewarded. But in reality, as you can check out yourself from my latest book, the Sabbatean Frankists wanted the Holocaust all along. And even Adolf Hitler was a product of a Sabbatean Frankist ritual. So here it's very important to realize that Peter Mandelson, for example, nowadays everybody is showing, and now there is an investigation, the police is going and investigating this guy, but nobody really knows who is Peter Mandelson. See? They think, Peter Mandelson is that English politician who was depicted here in a photo from the Epstein file wearing knickers, and he was nominated ambassador to the US by the present Prime Minister of the UK, who is in great trouble for that. Now I'm going to tell you who is Peter Mandelson to really make you understand how the Sabbatean Frankists operate, because otherwise you might still listen to the fairy tales of people on the mainstream news. Let me show you who is really Peter Mandelson, because Peter Mandelson, guys, is not just any guy. So let me show here. Okay. Lord Mandelson, by the way, or former Lord now. The police has been investigating his properties. For those who don't know who he is here in the United States of America, we are talking about one of the most influential politicians of the Labour Party in Great Britain for the last 30 years, maybe even 40. 2 properties linked to Peter Mandelson in Wiltshire and North London have been searched following allegation of misconduct in public office, the Metropolitan Police said. He apparently sold, in October 2008, Mandelson was, though, the subject of mass press speculation when it was reported that British-born Canadian financier Nathaniel Rothschild, Fifth Baron Rothschild, and the Russian oligarch Deripaska had met Mandelson when stayed in order to attend a party held by the Rothschild. This is very important because Peter Mandelson is actually from a very influential Jewish family. See, he was a member of parliament, secretary, minister without portfolio, British ambassador, nominated by the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who might lose his job because of it. But people don't really, and then, of course, they talk about the scandal. But here we are talking about a guy who comes from a family who, you see, the younger son of George Norman Tony Mandelson, advertising manager of the Jewish Chronicle. Then, of course, you have of Polish Jewish extraction, once again, Sabbatean Frankist. His grandfather, Norman Mandelson, founded the Aror United Synagogue. And this is a very important thing because this synagogue is a very influential synagogue. Very influential, and is connected to the Ashkenazis, of course. This is Sabbatean Frankist to the core. So it's not just Peter Mandelson, the guy, is an homosexual who was going to Epstein Island and now is being exposed in the Epstein files. No. This guy comes from a very important family of Sabbatean Frankists so it's very important, connected to the Rothschild. It's not even a secret. I think I can find you here a direct indication of his link to the Rothschild family and to Robert Maxwell. He was also linked to Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. It's like there was a lot of corruption always in Mandelson's life, and one of the scandals that surrounded in the past Mandelson involved even Robert Maxwell. Watch here. Maxwell. I will buy him a house. So not only the money he received from Jeffrey Epstein, who of course was working also with Mossad, but also the father of Ghislaine, Robert Maxwell, who was also working with Mossad. It's quite incredible that all these people are all connected and they are all part of the Sabbatean Frankist mafia, but nobody dares to say the name Sabbatean Frankist. Why is it that Leo Zagami is one of the few people who talks about the connection between Epstein and the Sabbatean Frankists, and the only one who has published a book, The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, based on these links? Now we have exposed these people. As of February 2026, former UK Cabinet Minister Ambassador Lord Peter Mandelson is under criminal investigation. We have the former Prince Andrew, who is hiding because they are trying to also have him to testimony. But I mean, of course, he's protected by his brother, the king. So they're going to try to... The The thing is that they have betrayed their countries. Things are actually happening abroad. There is investigations that are taking place. The Prince of Darkness is now a nickname that has been given to Mandelson. How comes there is no investigation on Les Wexner and on all the people who supported and aided Jeffrey Epstein here in the United States of America? Why? Why did, I mean, we have, imagine this, the DOJ asked for Jeffrey Epstein's help, and so they could, they could sort out this mess with the Edmund de Rothschild group. This is not, this is incredible. The Edmund de Rothschild group here is a financial institution born in 1953, so quite recently. Key people are Ariane de Rothschild, but when we go and see here the whole history of this company, we understand that the involvement of Jeffrey Epstein comes also in a moment in which, watch here, under the Swiss bank program, taxation in the United States, United States Department of Justice Tax Division. And in the end, they pay only, thanks to Jeffrey Epstein, 45.24 million penalty. 45 million penalty for a company that is dealing with billions of dollars is peanuts. Peanuts. But the agreement with the US Department of Justice regarding undeclared US accounts in Switzerland, imagine that, was facilitated by none other than Jeffrey Epstein. The Department of Justice is investigating Jeffrey Epstein. Ooh. Yes, a schmuck from Brooklyn.
On the board of Rockefeller, there was a money manager who said, Rockefeller needs someone with financial expertise because the university is growing and there's lots of new things. You have to, again, we go back to the original discussion the last time. Up until the mid-'80s or sort of early mid-'70s, the most important thing was your name. If you were Rockefeller, you already were considered to be brilliant. If you were head of General Motors, it was your reputation. It was who you knew, who your family was, what was your character.
In fact, he said it. It was who you knew, who your family was, your reputation, but nobody knows anything about the family of Jeffrey Epstein. Nobody wants to talk about the family of Jeffrey Epstein. We prefer to talk about other things. We don't want to confront the reality of the fact that Robert Maxwell thought he was the reincarnation of Jacob Frank, because in the tradition, in those mystic Jewish traditions, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Arizal, strongly believed in reincarnation. Even the Chabad movement believes in reincarnation. The disciple of Rabbi Isaac Luria, the creator of Lurianic Kabbalah, Rabbi Ahim Vital, compiled these teachings in a book I suggest you read. It's called the Sharam Agilum, which is the gate of reincarnations. Because they believe in the immortality of the soul, in this constant reincarnating. So Jeffrey Epstein might already be here with us. They might have even detected where he is, like the lamas of Tibet, when they reincarnate. And suddenly here we have, when the Edmund de Rothschild group was in trouble, it was the end of 2015, after months of turmoil, this Swiss private bank owned by a branch of the Rothschild dynasty that was involved in this multi-million-dollar settlement then, thanks to Epstein with the US Department of Justice. Ooh, and behind the scenes, the group French chief, Ariane de Rothschild, had tasked Jeffrey Epstein and the lawyer he had introduced her to, Kathy Rumler, with the closing deal. So it was Jeffrey Epstein dealing with the Department of Justice. Wake up, America. This is a fraud. The whole system is a fraud, and those people in Washington should be all arrested. All of them. Congress, executive power, legislative power, judiciary, they are all corrupt. What is happening today and what is coming out today is showing us that these people are above the law. And Jeffrey Epstein was one of them until, like I explain in my book, he might have been regarded as maybe somebody too risky to keep alive. Or maybe they simply removed him. There's a lot of talk these days about Jeffrey Epstein maybe still being alive. That's completely possible. There is some very weird things that came out of this latest batch of Epstein files. But in any case, it was under the Trump administration that he was eliminated, and that his testimony that could have finally exposed all the rich and powerful elite. Now, well, his testimony, guys, was not, unfortunately, for this timeline. Maybe there is another alternative timeline in the universe, in the multiverse, where Jeffrey Epstein finally exposes everybody and where there is justice for his victims. Not in this timeline.
And then in the mid-70s, basically, if you remember, you probably had a calculator. It was very advanced in those days to have a Texas Instrument calculator, where it could, by putting in the numbers, it would multiply for you to do square roots. And that was the first, and everyone who had a calculator was already advanced on Wall Street. A simple calculator, almost like your accountant. The most important parts of business were really now going to calculations. So it's not only mathematics, but it's things that could be calculated. Reputation couldn't be calculated. I could give you, are you a 10 on a reputation scale, an 8? What does it mean to have a measurement of your reputation? We'll get to that later.
Somebody says, for someone as smart as Leo Zagami, it's amazing that he didn't immediately recognize that and instead decided to drink the Kool-Aid that Alex Jones and Trump were selling. Listen, my friend, I was having a lot of problems in Italy. I needed allies. Eventually, I came to America. I'm now an American citizen. And now, protected by the First Amendment, I can finally say what I think. I was about to be murdered in Europe if I stayed there. So maybe you should shut up and read my books and study a little bit better what Leo Zagami was subject to after his first revelations. Remember, his 20 years of Illuminati confessions, and even Jeffrey Epstein knew about them.
But people, places like Rockefeller needed someone to say, look, we're entering a different world where numbers and the numbers of companies, portfolio management was going to be balanced. It was going to be statistical. Jeffrey, could you come on the board? Potentially sit on the finance committee, Nancy Kissinger and a bunch of other people. And David Rockefeller and I got along very well. He was this unbelievable human being. Respectful to everyone. He introduced his driver as his colleague, not his driver. He would never say, this is my driver. He said, it's my colleague. And David started to explain to me world politics. So David would say, Jeffrey, money is going to be sort of the most important things. People don't understand money. You seem to have this knack for money. I said to David, tell me about your life. What was the worst and the best part of your life? So David said, when I grew up, everyone knew I was a Rockefeller. They didn't know that my father told me he would not leave me a dime. No money. But every time we went out to eat, me and my 5 friends at school, they would leave me the bill. They would expect me to pick up the check because I was a Rockefeller. And he said, I was chairman of Chase Bank. And he said, I remember like it was yesterday, one of the headlines in Time magazine said, David, please fire yourself. So he thought that there was a world that existed that would be a combination of both politics and business and leadership. What do I mean? He formed something called the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is some spooky stuff. People said it was something the Illuminati, there's some mystery about it. People that ran
Keep on supporting the Leo Zagami Show, Illuminati News. 20 years of Illuminati confessions in all our platforms. And I see you next week. Guys, remember, this kind of content you can find only here. Only here.
Didn't disappear because he cleared the video.